When you think of Vikings, what comes to mind? Fierce, bearded warriors on massive ships, storming foreign shores. But what if I told you that the Viking Age had its own extraordinary women, whose stories are rarely told? Today, you won't just hear about them. You will live one day as a Viking woman. Would you fight beside men? What rights would you have? What would marriage look like for you? Let's step into the Viking world, through the eyes of a woman. Welcome back to Female Tales. I'm Yulia, and together on this channel, we explore the stories of remarkable women from history. If history speaks to you, like the video, join our community, and let's head straight into the depths of the past. Our imaginary time machine has brought us to a very specific day, June 8th, 793. And this is the day you will spend as a woman in the Viking world. This date is not accidental. On this very day, Viking ships reached the shores of England and attacked the monastery of Lindisfarne, looting it and shocking the entire Christian world. Many historians mark this raid as the beginning of the Viking Age. We don't know whether women warriors stood among them that day, and whether you could have been there too, sword in hand, is something we'll explore later. But one thing I know for certain, without you, without women, those ships would never have reached England at all. They would still be sitting quietly in their Scandinavian fjords. Because while men sailed, conquered, and fought, women made that world possible. So, what would this day look like for you? It is early morning. You wake up as a free woman in your longhouse. In the centre of the house, a fire is already burning. And yes, I said longhouse intentionally, because your entire home is essentially one long room. You eat here, sleep here, work here. Almost like a loft, just in the 8th century. And I also called you a free woman on purpose. Viking society had its own hierarchy. At the top were the jarls, the aristocrats, and rulers. Below them were the free peasants, the carla, and at the bottom were the thralls, enslaved people. The Vikings were conquerors, and they brought enslaved people back from their raids to serve in their households. You put on your linen underdress and a woolen overdress, fastening it with a pair of oval brooches at your shoulders, the kind worn by almost every married woman. And judging by archaeological finds, Viking women were true lovers of jewellery. They wore everything: beads, brooches, arm rings, even toe rings, so please don't be shy. Decorate yourself. As a married woman, your hair should be gathered into a proper hairstyle. Only young unmarried girls were allowed to wear their hair loose, tied back with a simple ribbon. And don't forget to hang your keys from your belt. A powerful symbol that you are the mistress of the household, the keeper of supplies, the husfreyja. And if you just thought, oh no, back to being the lady of the house like in every era, not quite. Viking women had a very particular and very serious role in managing the household. They weren't just raising children and cooking meals. They distributed tasks among servants and slaves, managed resources, oversaw production, and controlled property. In many ways, Viking women were estate managers. They were businesswomen. For a very long time, historians looked at the Viking world almost exclusively through a male lens, focusing only on raids and conquests. But while the ships were crossing seas, the entire social structure at home rested on the shoulders of women. Because it's one thing to sail somewhere and conquer something. It's another thing entirely to have a home to return to. And thanks to their women, Viking men had that home. Women could manage property alongside men, conduct trade at markets, and, something that was unavailable to many women in Christian Europe at the time, independently own property. In many ways, they were autonomous and legally empowered. Now, if you want to sell something as a Viking businesswoman, you first need to produce something. One of the greatest skills of Viking women was weaving. And I hope you enjoy working with your hands because this was no easy task. If you wanted wool garments, you first had to shear the sheep. If you wanted linen, you had to grow and process flax yourself. And it wasn't just clothing for the family. Viking women also produced the sails for the ships. If you've ever seen a Viking ship in a museum, you can imagine the size of those sails. Creating a single sail required approximately 10,269 hours of labour. That's about 3.5 years of continuous work. And to clothe a crew of 70 men, a group of women would need up to 17.5 years of work. Just think about that number. This is exactly why I believe that without women, the Vikings would not have sailed very far at all. Your husband, by the way, is currently away on a voyage. And here's something interesting. If your husband had been gone for more than 3 years, and you had not seen him or shared a physical relationship during that time, you had the legal right to divorce him. If he struck you, you could also demand a divorce. Causing harm to a woman was considered deeply dishonourable in Viking society. And honestly, when you compare it to many parts of Christian Europe at the same time, Viking society appears surprisingly progressive in certain aspects of marriage law. But, and there is always a but, women were not allowed to take lovers. That was forbidden. A husband, however, could bring another woman into the household, a kind of secondary partner known as a frilla. She was not a legal wife, and importantly, she was expected to submit to you, the primary wife. Still, not exactly pleasant. Now, how difficult was divorce? Surprisingly simple. All you had to do was declare the dissolution of the marriage in the presence of witnesses. That was enough to make it legally valid. Upon divorce, you would receive your dowry back. You could also claim certain property acquired during the marriage. Your young children would remain with you. Older children's residence would depend on the wealth and status of your birth family, the family you would return to after the separation. In many ways, it doesn't sound all that different from today. But you're not thinking about divorce right now. You're thinking about lunch. So, what did Vikings actually eat? The foundation of their diet was simple: bread, dairy products, and meat. Nothing fancy, but hearty and filling. Seafood was, of course, essential. They lived by the sea, after all. Depending on the region, they ate salmon, cod, and even herring. They also used various herbs and wild plants as seasonings, carefully gathered and dried. Viking women knew their way around nature's pantry. If you want a modern visual reference, just imagine one of those trad wife Instagram videos where everything is made from scratch. Grinding grain, kneading dough, stirring pots over fire. That's basically your daily routine. Now, it's time for you to attend the village assembly, the Thing. The Thing was where plans were discussed, disputes were settled, and the most important decisions were made. It was the political and legal heart of Viking society. You would not have been able to vote on equal terms with men. That's true. But you could speak. You could voice concerns, ideas, warnings, and your words would not necessarily be ignored. The opinions of widows, women who owned substantial land, and especially vulvas, seeresses or oracles, carried particular weight. The Vikings worshipped a whole pantheon of gods, and women like the vulva were believed to stand closer to that divine realm. People sought them out for prophecies before journeys or military campaigns. In fact, the role of the vulva was one of the very few positions in Viking society reserved exclusively for women. Even ordinary women could bring a touch of magic into daily life if they knew how to read and use runes. Runes were not only a writing system, they were used for divination, healing, and protection rituals. When you return home, you gather your children around the fire and begin telling them sagas, stories of voyages, battles, and legendary ancestors. Sagas were more than entertainment. They were history, identity, memory, and it was often the mother who passed them down. Just as many of us read bedtime stories today, shaping how our children understand the world. Although most surviving skaldic poems are attributed to men, there is evidence that women also composed and performed poetry. One known example is Jorunn Skaldmær, a 10th century poet mentioned in the Heimskringla. And of course, you must tell them about Lagertha, the noble shield maiden who led a troop of women to aid Ragnar Lothbrok in battle. Struck by her courage, Ragnar wanted to marry her, but Lagertha was not easily won. Before agreeing, she placed a bear and a fierce guard dog at her doorway, and Ragnar had to kill them both to claim her hand. They married and had 2 daughters. Later, Ragnar left her for another wife, but Lagertha continued fighting in his campaigns. She eventually remarried, became Queen of Norway, and later killed her own husband, seizing his throne and ruling in his place. After that, her trail in history fades into legend, but perhaps that is fitting. Some women do not disappear, they become myth. Night falls over your village. After putting the children to bed, you begin gathering your belongings. Soon, your family will be leaving. A new journey awaits you, not just for trade or raiding, but to settle new lands. Vikings did not only travel to raid, they sailed to the Caspian Sea and the Mediterranean, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, reached Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. And they did not go alone. Wives and children often travelled with them, helping to build entirely new communities far from home. Among these women was Odd the Deep-Minded, a remarkable figure who secretly commissioned the building of a large ship and sailed with her family from Scotland to Iceland, where she established a new settlement. So yes, the life of a Viking woman could hold far more than routine and hearth fire. It could mean migration, reinvention, and courage. But perhaps you are thinking, even with greater rights, didn't everything still revolve around the home? And here is where I reveal the final card. Some Viking women may have chosen a completely different path, the path of the warrior. For a long time, historians and archaeologists assumed that only men were warriors. Women mentioned in the sagas, like Lagertha or Hervor from the saga of Hervor, who lived and fought as a warrior, were dismissed as legend, folklore, exaggeration. And whenever archaeologists uncovered richly furnished Viking warrior graves, they almost automatically classified them as male. But in 2017, something happened that shook the academic world. The remains of a famous warrior burial in Birka, long believed to belong to a high-ranking male Viking, were reanalyzed. The grave was impressive, surrounded by weapons, horses, and marked by a large stone, clearly honoring an elite warrior. For 140 years, scholars assumed the skeleton was male. DNA testing revealed something unexpected. The warrior was a woman. This discovery forced historians to reconsider long-held assumptions. If a fully armed mounted warrior received such an honourable burial in a military cemetery, then perhaps Viking women did, at least sometimes, fight as warriors. Of course, debates continue. Some argue about interpretation, about symbolism, about status versus actual combat. And yes, this finding raises uncomfortable questions about how many other graves may have been misidentified over the centuries. But whether Viking women regularly fought in battle or not, one thing is clear: they likely knew how to use weapons. Because when the men left for long expeditions, the protection of the household, the land, and the children rested on women's shoulders. And in a world that could turn violent at any moment, you had to be able to defend yourself. Viking women lived in a harsh and demanding world, but they were not merely shadows of the men beside them. They built, they governed, they created, they endured. And without their steady hands and sharp minds, there would have been no voyages and no home to return to. History rarely places women at the center of the story, but the more we learn, the clearer it becomes. They were not background characters, they were the foundation. Now it's up to us to look at their story differently. And who knows, Viking women may still have more surprises for us. Would you survive a day as a Viking woman? Tell me in the comments. And let's choose our next journey together. I'll see you in the next video.